Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and a stone will come back on him who starts it rolling. Lots of cause and effect dealing with fools in this reading.
Mm-hmm.
So from the beginning, like snow in summer or rain in harvest, so is honor not fitting for a fool. In the thing I thought of immediately when I read that was participation trophies. People being rewarded for putting in no effort.
Yep.
If you reward something, you get more of it. So if you reward non-participation, then you get more non-participation. That's not to say that everybody who gets a participation trophy didn't try hard. But if you're going to reward them for not excelling, then why should they try to excel in the future? And you get the same exact thing with government welfare programs and letting men compete in women's sports. It's all the same thing, or at least it all has the same results.
It's communism.
Yeah. Communism is a system of government run by fools for the sake of fools. Anything else to say about that one?
The woke culture would fit within that.
Yeah. The whole thing of people deserve everything that they want simply because they exist. And people who have worked hard for it and gotten the things they want because they earned it, they shouldn't have it, whether it's because they're part of a privileged class or for some circumstance that's completely beyond people's control. They should either be rewarded or punished. And that's just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's evil.
I agree.
It's not just ridiculous, it's evil.
We became involved with the pyramid company.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they presented, which makes perfect sense, that's probably why they did so well, is they make sense. You just have no quantitative way of knowing if it's affecting you or not, at least for most people. You know, take this supplement and you don't know if you're doing better because of the supplement or because of whatever the circumstance is. But one of the things they presented is an ingredient that they used was maybe it was a root. I don't remember the exact item, but it grew in a very wild habitat. And it was because of that wild habitat that it was hardy and thus would be effective in dealing with whatever your malady was, you know. So
yeah, sounds reasonable.
It makes perfect sense. And I'm not saying yay or nay on Manatech. I'm just saying that presentation, it suggests that when you have strife or when you have affliction or you have to deal with some sort of competition, if you will, it makes you stronger, you know. So something similar to that.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And if you take away the competition, like programs like affirmative action, which I'm sure when it started was, you know, had the greatest of intentions, at least most of the people involved with it, but it takes away competition and takes away all reason to become a better person, to become more competent.
Well, many scripture says, or many, I'm thinking it'd be in the Proverbs, might be in Psalms, where it references, be thankful for affliction. Why? I don't want to have a hard life. Well, it's that affliction or that, it's that what makes you stronger, you know. Wisdom is rooted in that. You don't get wisdom unless you've gone through something.
Yeah, that's something that we'll see this in a couple of Proverbs later on, but you can read the Proverbs all day long and I'm sure it's going to tell you something, but unless you put it into action somehow, unless you're doing something, then, you know, it's like studying golf by reading books and watching videos and not actually playing golf. It's not real wisdom. It's knowledge about wisdom. All right, well, let's move on to verse 2. Like a sparrow in its flitting, like a swallow in its flying, a curse that is causeless does not alight. You know, I don't want to say any names because, you know, people's personal business is not everybody else's business. But, I know somebody somebody told them that something bad was going to happen in their family, that, things were going to come apart in a certain way.
Right.
And that it was like a worm burrowing into his brain, and it caused all kinds of problems. Not
Mhm.
because it was true. I mean, it wasn't like a real curse that somebody could put on him, this guy and his family, but it was something that, because he thought about it and he accepted that it might actually be real,
Mhm.
then he started behaving in ways that made it real.
Right.
And other people in the family picked up on his attitude, and then they started behaving in ways that made it real. And it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that way.
Mhm. It's almost like voodoo.
Yeah.
So I've seen the I've seen that applied in a different fashion, and it's squirrely logic, but it's almost relying upon the scripture, and
Hmm.
that is making an assertion that is ridiculous, and then saying, you know what, if it doesn't apply to you, why are you getting mad? So
Hmm.
it's making what does it say, a curse. It's cursing somebody, and then saying, hey, if this curse is not applicable to you, then don't be bothered.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually like another proverb that we're going to get to later tonight. Like the it says a deceiver, but I think bully is probably more to the point in our modern culture. But somebody who mocks or lies to you and then says, "Oh, I was just joking." In part, they're talking
Right.
about practical jokers, but really they're talking about people who are trying to bully and manipulate you and then pass off the blame. Like, "Oh, it's your fault. You just misunderstood." Yeah, another application of that is if you think about, the episode with Balaam and Balak, and Balaam couldn't put a curse on Israel as long as they were faithful to God. And so he taught Balak how to undermine Israel's faith in God, and therefore they were able to put a curse on them after that.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, Israel put a curse on themselves by their behavior. And so that's when you get a curse deserved. And, all the curses are out there just waiting. If you've committed yourself to God and obeying his commands, and then you reject that, well, now you're just inviting all the curses of the law.
Yeah.
And, technically all those curses apply to the nation, not to individual people. But in order for it to affect the nation, it has to affect individuals first.
Well, people make up the nation.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So in very related proverb to at least to verse 1 and verse 2 also, a whip for the horse, a bridle for the donkey, and a rod for the back of fools. So there's a curse that's deserved, a rod for the back of fools. And there's an interesting implication there that curses are frequently instructive, especially the curses of the law. When God says, if you're faithful, then you'll have all these blessings. If you're not faithful, then all these curses are going to come upon you. But then it goes through this process of 7 levels of curses. And each one is worse than the one before. But in between, God says, if you refuse to repent, it's going to get worse. And here's what's going to happen. And then if you refuse to repent, it's going to get even worse. And so each level of curses is meant to provoke repentance. So you can get out of it by repenting. A fool can stop the rod by stopping being a fool, by learning wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
or at least keeping his mouth shut.
Right. Right. Okay. So this is going to open up a can of worms, and I'm going to use this example,
Mm-hmm.
but it could be extrapolated to many different areas. All right. My example is I overeat, therefore I'm fat. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the example that hopefully it doesn't apply to me, but venereal disease,
Mm-hmm.
that's a curse as a result of an action. You can take a remedy, if you will, and continue to act out in that same fashion, but it's still a curse. So you may have stopped it for medical reasons, but there's still the action with the resulting curse part of it. I see ads lately. It's for some sort of AIDS treatment. I
Yeah,
think it's like,
seeing a lot of those ads.
yeah, you only take this once a week or once a month, something like that. But
Mhm.
it seems that the treatment is there to, well, you want, on one hand, you want somebody to recover, and I understand that, but it seems to exist, and maybe it's just me reading into it, so that you can continue with the actions that you've been doing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah, and yeah, that I get the same vibe from those commercials. It's like they're selling their product as something that enables you to be promiscuous.
Mm-hmm.
And the wording that they choose, you can remain undetectable. It's like
Yes.
I know technically I know what they're saying, that your blood levels of the HIV or whatever it is they're measuring are going to be undetectable. But the way that they're saying it, it's like you can fool anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to know. And I
Yes.
think that really is what they're implying.
So sometimes the curse has to take place so that you realize certain actions are not desirable or should not be, or you should stop.
Yeah,
The nature of curses, is it permanent or temporary? That's unfortunately often it's permanent.
yeah, that is true. Yeah, curses are frequently just the natural consequences of what you're doing.
Hmm.
Yeah, what you're saying about permanent consequences. I think what was it, Nietzsche, who said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
That's true to an extent, but obviously it's not true all the time. Some disease that's going to kill you or drive you insane or something that cripples you is not making you stronger.
Mm-mm.
So there are activities that will not make you stronger if the natural consequences hit you.
Mm-hmm.
On to verse 4. Well, 4 and 5, they go together. Excuse me. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Yeah, this is I think about this proverb almost every day on social media,
Yeah.
because there are so many trolls out there. And how do you respond to a troll? Well, it depends on the troll. It depends on who's watching. Most of
Mm-hmm.
the time you ignore them, mute, block, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you can use it as a teaching moment for people who might be paying attention, who might be reading along or watching along. And sometimes people need to be exposed. So don't engage them on their own level, but sometimes you need to engage them on another level, disrupt their whatever game they're playing. Don't answer them the way that they expect, but address their foolishness rather than the argument or whatever it is they're actually saying.
It can be interpreted so many ways. This week I had the CEO of my stock engaged with somebody in a discussion on Chinese drones that are entering the US. And I loved it. I'm thinking, hey, this is a discussion that needs to be had. And yeah, does the CEO have a vested interest to disc Chinese drones? Yes, he does. There were some people that took the opposite approach and said that's not becoming for CEO to enter into this discussion. So it's very interesting how engaging can be interpreted differently.
Yeah.
Well, what about somebody that's wise in his own eyes? That's
Sometimes
certainly,
somebody needs to tell them.
I'm going through that right now in my training. I was the top of my business for knowing that I how to write certain estimates and being proficient and so forth. Well,
Mhm.
now I'm relearning this job and doing a different position, and I'm bottom in the totem pole in terms of knowledge, and it's quite humbling.
Mhm.
Not necessarily knowledge. I can do my job, but when you realize that you're messing up left and right, like wow. So trying not to get discouraged in that, but still realizing, hey, these people are quote unquote criticizing you for a purpose.
Mhm.
Actually, what they're doing is to your benefit. It's humbling, I tell you what.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah, I think it when you're engaging with people who, that you don't know, but you think they're acting like a fool,
Mhm.
there's really kind of an art to determining whether this is somebody who is teachable or somebody who is only there to disrupt things, or there's an opportunity for other people to learn. It takes
Right.
a lot of experience interacting with those kind of people to tell. And in certain areas, online, I think I usually have a pretty good feel for that sort of thing. In real life, person to person, I'm not so good at that. I
Hmm.
don't judge real life interactions as well. And I think, if someone in your shoes there who has a lot of experience, but knows that they're in a new area where their previous experience and knowledge doesn't really help as much as they would like it to,
Hmm.
you can kind of tell that that person might be coming on strong at first, but then they react in ways that you can tell this is someone who knows that there's something wrong, or that they're willing to be wrong, willing to learn something new. And I really like those people online because, I like people who ask hard questions and are willing to interact without name calling and getting angry. Those people, engage them long enough so that anybody else observing knows what's really going on,
Hmm.
and then be done with them. Either screen capture the conversation and block them, or just mute them and let them yell at themselves for a while.
It's a way to go.
Yes. And Jay, I agree with you, what you were saying about someone that
Mhm.
can disagree, discuss something without name calling. And unfortunately, I think for some reason, we've gotten away from that.
Yeah, it is a lost
Oh
art.
yeah.
And I think part of the reason is that we interact with so many people that we don't have a real relationship with. If we
That's good.
valued those relationships, then we'd be a little more hesitant about calling names, I think.
Yeah, that's why I
Yeah.
don't call my names.
That's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that if you look at how we treat people that we do respect, when we have something like delicate or a topic that's delicate we want to talk about, we spend a lot of energy and effort and time trying to figure out like how to approach it, or how to approach the subject, or all these things. But when it's someone we don't know, it's just so much easier to just go off, half cocked and just say whatever. Because you don't have anything to lose. That's the way we look at it in our society. It's just there's nothing to lose, so we can just say whatever we want. And I'm sure there's more to it than that, just with the status of where we are, how things are degrading. But
Mhm. Yeah, this month I decided over the next, from now on probably, to kind of alternate our monthly themes between something, I'm not sure how to put this, something more relational, like we've done honoring parents, and we did families in transition, those kinds of things. But I'm going to be alternating that with more technical ideas. So this month, our theme is Bible translations. And when we get into the more technical stuff, ironically, this is where people I think are going to be more offended. And we're going to have expert guests for conversations, and they're going to say things that are going to make people uncomfortable. Bible translations are a lot like sausage in that the end product is amazing, but the process of creating a Bible translation is messy. And
yeah,
what goes into a real Bible translation is going to make a lot of people really uncomfortable when they think about their concept of divine inspiration and the infallibility of scripture, those ideas. For example, apparently the Textus Receptus that the King James is based on is not a real set of manuscripts. It's the King James translators used a bunch of different manuscripts to base their translation on. And then somebody later took all of these different translations that the King James translators used and created a single manuscript, sort of merged them all to make a single contiguous text out of it. So it's really an amalgamation of a bunch of different manuscripts to create the Textus Receptus. But people have this idea that this is the original Bible that goes all the way back to the apostles, but it's not really necessarily so. And so we're gonna get some exercise this month on disagreeing with people in still being happy to fellowship, because that can be a touchy subject.
I went to a fellowship this Saturday
Mhm.
and saw people that I knew, a few people. It was good to do some fellowship. I was not sure how I would have responded because there was one person in particular that I really did not want to see there. He was not there. And the reason I didn't want to see him is because the very first time I ever met him, I considered it confrontational, whereas I'm sure he was more or less just trying to figure out who I was. And, so you walk up to somebody and they say, hey, so was Passover the 14th or the 15th day? And I'm just like, good. And you, but it did bother me because I wasn't prepared, and I'm not still to this day opinionated on that. The conversations are interesting, but they're not life-changing. So to have a difference of opinion and be respectful, that's good. But sometimes I don't have an opinion, and I don't want to be forced to have an opinion. So,
Yeah.
Excuse me.
All right, let's move on to verse 7. Like a lame man's legs, which hang useless, is a proverb in the mouth of fools. There are several proverbs in this chapter that speak on the same topic. Like verse 9, like a thorn that goes up into the hand of a drunkard is a proverb in the mouth of fools. And yeah, there was another one. Can't remember exactly where it is right now, but yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on this one. I've been talking first, but on 7 and 9, really. I mean, 8 they're all related, but actually this is interesting. I just noticed that 7 and 8 and then 9 and 10 are a parallelism. First, you've got how a proverb is either useless or harmful. And then you've got someone talking about someone using a military weapon and, using it as a metaphor of a fool. So you've got that same pattern in 4 verses.
Well, isn't there a theme there that you're using the proverbs to try to create a point, maybe not necessarily appropriately applying it, but you have an axe to grind and you're trying to grind it with the proverb?
Yeah, I think that is one of the main points, that a fool with a proverb is, if he doesn't think that he's the super wise guy, then he's being a wise guy. He's using the proverb to try to make a fool of somebody else rather than using it to try to instruct or gain in wisdom. So he's trying to hurt other people with it.
I like where it says, the lame man's legs. Not that he doesn't have legs. They're just useless. And just like the proverb in the mouth of fools, it's useless. And I think that's the thing that kind of, goes back and forth. Sometimes you try and teach or show someone something, and no matter how simple you put it, it doesn't click with them.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. They can't grasp it, and it's like having, it's like legs that don't work, right? It's
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah, you have in verse 7 and 9, you have 2 sides of that. In verse 7, the proverb is useless to the fool. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't know how to use it. In verse 9, it actually hurts him. And one example of that is spare the rod, spoil the child. That's not word for word. That's not in the Bible. It's he who spares the rod hates his child, in some other verses that say similar things.
Right.
But people like to use that as an excuse for abuse. And one person will say, this proverb isn't really talking about, physical punishment at all. It's a metaphorical rod. And so all you have to do is verbally correct your child and they will be healthier and happier and all that. I'm sure there's some child out there in the world that works for, but no,
Yes.
it really is talking about a rod. It's talking about
Yes.
spanking or, striking your child. And there are other people on the other extreme who will say, beat that child until he does what you want him to do, break their spirits. And that's wrong too. And
Yes.
by destroying your children's ability to behave or creating resentment with your children, you're only hurting yourself. I mean, you're hurting them too, of course, but you're also hurting yourself.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
I agree. I always try to, when I discipline my children, I always try to make sure that they knew what it was about versus me just beating them. When you do it out of anger,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
it's no longer, in my opinion, it's no longer about the discipline or the correction. It's a place of frustration. You're angry, and that's how you're doing it versus raising your child or disciplining him in a proper way.
Yeah.
That having been
Yeah.
said, that makes you ponder when God disciplined basically the world through the flood. That seems to be, wow, very angry, but it must have been extremely bad for him to discipline in that fashion so as to have a reset, if you will,
Yeah. That is answering a fool according to his folly.
Right.
You have to.
And what do you
Yeah.
think? Go ahead.
I was about to say that you have to tailor the response to the child or the fool or the employee or whatever it is to make. I mean, you have to tailor it for their circumstances and their character. And in the
Right.
case of the antediluvian world, apparently their character was pretty bad, so it took a pretty heavy rod.
Had to have been. So what do you think 8 means?
Well, binding the stone in the sling means that you're tying it in there instead of resting it in the pouch. I mean, I've never used the kind of slings that they had in the Bible, the 2 straps with the little pouch in the middle. And
Right.
apparently this can be a pretty deadly weapon. But I've seen nunchucks used. And I know that somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, swing that thing around and break their knuckles open or hit themselves in the head. I imagine that swinging a sling that has a stone bound up in it could be very similar. That you're going to swing it around and cast it out there, and then that stone is going to whip back around and knock you in the head or something.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was meaning by binding it. Yeah, I didn't know if that was a means by which to sling or not. So you're saying to basically gum up the works is foolish.
Yeah, and gum it up in a way that's going to do harm.
Right. And it's not going to be released at the time, And the point of releasing of a stone, especially in a sling, the way they use it, was all important. The timing, when just like when David used it with Goliath, the timing of that would meant everything.
Yeah, you'd have to be an expert.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, moving down to let's talk about verse 10. I mean, it's related, same basic idea. You've got somebody who's using a projectile weapon, and they're a fool, but it says, like an archer who wounds everyone is one who hires a passing fool or drunkard. And I think that I like the way the TLV puts this. Like an archer who wounds at random is one who hires a fool or any passerby. So if you hire somebody to do a job and you don't know that they're actually qualified for the job, you have no idea what's going to happen. You could be creating a big problem.
Wow, that says a lot, because I know of a few people that have, under the guise of ministry, hired some improperly qualified people.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend that was a Mason that he did that regularly, and it hurt his business, but he equated that with, I'm ministering to these people. So that's interesting. It almost puts it upon you as a business owner to you get what you deserve, if you're going to be discerning. And
Yeah, and
Or
in
if
this
you just
case, it's not just you who's being hurt, but other people. The people that you're doing business with, people who are just
Mhm.
innocent bystanders. I think in modern day terms, a good parallel would be hiring a truck driver. If you
Mhm.
don't verify that that truck driver knows what he's doing, is not under the influence, nothing like that, you could be killing people because you have semi truck is a big dangerous object, and flying down the highways at 70 to 80 miles an hour, you got to make sure that the guy behind the wheel is not a total fool.
Yeah, it's neat the way that comes to life because, you just think if you need someone to work for you, the person that passing by may work, but it may not be a long-term answer.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
more than likely, it's going to be a situation where it's going to do more harm than good. I've
Yeah.
experienced it myself, because you sometimes you want to help people, you want to kind of do your basically help someone in a tough situation. And a lot of times it's probably best not to hire them, but maybe just help them out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I did have one person that told me that, you don't hire projects.
Unless your
Yeah.
business is the project.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
and it also points to the fact that like there are ways that we can hire people and build them up and promote them. Like we can hire people and start them at the bottom and give them opportunity and like help educate them or help train them or whatever. And we can do that. We can empower people and help them in that way. And we can do those things as projects, even within the context of our business, if we understand what we're doing. If we understand that like we're hiring them at like a lower, more qualified level and trying to bring them up, if that's what they're in it for. But that's
Yeah.
very different than just putting somebody in a spot because you need a body and they need a job, right? It's definitely going to backfire. It's definitely going to cause problems.
Well, also you sometimes, I mean, I've seen it in my business. I've seen people hired because they allegedly have a skill set, but they may not be hired for character purposes. It's almost like those that are hired with some innate characteristic are going to succeed, and you almost want to find that characteristic, and I don't know how you quantify that, but it's certainly, I think it's a truth.
Yeah, if you got the time to train somebody, hiring for character can pay off in the long run.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. I did that a couple of times when I was at the hospital, and it paid off. And there were times where character wasn't good, and it went just as badly as I thought it would go. But we were desperate. And right now a lot of people are having this issue, right? Because it's hard to find good people right now.
Yeah, it sure is. I don't think just because we have the right heart doesn't mean that situation is going to work out. And
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times, and we have the right heart. We wanted to work out so badly. We would even come to work for them. We would do the job for them, but it doesn't. It ends up hurting them because they're not learning anything from it. And I think sometimes the best thing that can happen to a person in this situation is that you tell them no and you tell them why.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a little off topic, but my son asked me for a reference when he was about 17 or 18 years old. And I told him, I said, I couldn't give him a good reference.
Ooh,
And
there's a rod.
he replied to me, he says, but Dad, I'm your son. And I said, well, that's exactly why I can't do it.
Oh, wow.
Because it was important that he would get the understanding that a reference is not something that, we do as a friend or, hey, it's because I can vouch for you. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I would give him a raving reference now because he is that person. But and that's the
And
thing.
probably because you said something.
Yeah, you know what? I always like to think that it that did resonate with him, that he had to ask himself, why would my dad give me a good reference?
You just
And
said verse 4, Ken. What you said is exactly what verse 4 is. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you like him yourself. So if you had given him a reference and he had been a failure, then that reflects on you.
yeah, exactly. And that's what I told the same thing. I said, because now my word is not good. Okay, because I'm being tainted by, oh, it's my son, it's my daughter, it's a friend, it's my cousin. I think we have to sometimes it's hard, just like you said earlier, that sometimes it's hard to say things to people that we love. How do we say it? And that's the problem. How do we tell the ones that we love that that there are issues in their life?
Yeah. Not doing him any favors if you give him that reference when he's not ready for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a very similar situation with my own son. It wasn't a job reference, but he was asking me to help him make some connections. And I told him, I can't in good conscience do that. You go give me something to sell and then come and talk to me again.
Mean dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that same kind of situation where it's paying off. We're seeing him work harder to become that person that he needs to be, that's a blessing.
Yeah, my story along those lines is my boy wanted to go for, I think it was a scholarship or something. And he was seeking the scholarship not based upon merit, but based upon the subgroup that he associates with. And by presenting that as opposed to I'm deserving because of X, Y, or Z, I didn't recommend that he do that, because I did not feel that to be a righteous move. Just because let's say I want a scholarship because I am part of this oppressed group, that was not merit based, and therefore I didn't think it was wise for him to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
It might have worked though, because we do have things are set up a certain way now.
Yeah.
Okay, so ready to go on to verse 11?
It's a good one.
I think
Like
so.
a dog that returns to his vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. Yeah, this goes back to the rod for the back of fools too. That's the purpose of the rod, is to stop the fool from going back to his folly. So if you're always enabling or ignoring, he's just going to keep doing it. Somebody's got to intervene at some point.
But what makes us so surprised, though, when we see someone keep repeating the same thing? It's like we expect a different outcome. They get another, you give them another chance. Nothing has changed, but we expect the outcome to change. It's kind of like when you did experiments in science. You put two chemicals together, you're going to get the same reaction, no matter what. Get the same reaction. You get the same, barring you use the same amount, you're going to get the same reaction. I think the fool going to repeat his folly, and the dog's going to return to its vomit.
Yep.
Yeah. If you go back to some of the other proverbs that we've even studied, it's like a lot of the talk about correction is there, and I think that the only chance a fool has is if somebody's going to speak truth or correction to them, or point out where their folly is. Like that's the only way they have that opportunity to grow and change. So it comes back to like we're talking about like what's going to happen with this dog who keeps doing the same things, but it's really pointing to the obvious, which is that something needs to happen. There's some kind of intervention that needs to happen.
Why
And
does a dog eat its own vomit?
I have no idea. I don't have
No idea.
animals, so I have no
I
idea.
don't know. I'm asking the question. Why would they?
Well, my thing is this: isn't it food? He just ate it a while ago, right? It's
Yeah,
still
maybe
food.
that's what it is. Is like he's thinking like, well, this is food. Yeah.
Hey, this is good stuff here.
Okay. No. Think about that though. That shows a lack of discernment on.
Well, it's instinct for them that they eat,
Yeah.
right? Like they don't have the capacity we have. So there is
Okay,
this
so if you're
animalistic
applying it to
response.
if you're applying it to a human, let's say, why would somebody revisit what they've done? That well, there's got to be some sort of joy or some sort of like at least you have an alcoholic that continually drinks. Well, yeah, you can get to the point where it's a physical craving, or a cocaine addict or something like that. But there is something that is desirous at some point in that process, right? That makes them want to get that high or whatever.
I think that's possible, but I also think that it's much more about lacking self-control and the ability to think about to put off, maybe it's put off gratification. It goes back to that animalistic instinct, like we're humans, we're animals, but we're supposed to rule over that animal nature. We're supposed to use our minds and our obedience to God to like put aside our desires that are fleshly and go against what God says and go against wisdom even, and be able to say, okay, I'm going to put that aside and I'm going to like do this thing that's wiser or do this thing that's better. And animals can't do that. I mean, the dog returning to its vomit is just because, yeah, maybe I just threw up all the food I ate. Now I'm hungry again. This is
look,
what's
there's some
there,
food.
like it's food. But that's kind of based on instinct. There's not a whole lot of logic going on. It's just I'm hungry.
This is
And
where
they don't have a choice.
a lot of our more base urges, this is where they really warp our judgment. Drugs are especially bad about this because, all the mundane things, I want to say, like sex or sports or, whatever it is that gives you an endorphin rush. Those things are at least natural, and they can enable you to ignore your bad choices or ignore the consequences of your bad choices for a short period of time. But drugs, that can make you ignore everything. You can feel like everything is going right when everything is going wrong.
Yeah.
And it is, yeah, I think that is an especially bad trap for people, because once you get to that point where it's all about the endorphins, where you have to keep covering up the failures, I mean, you can't really face it, you're kind of trapped. Because once you stop, all those failures that have been, piling up behind you, they're all just going to run you over. And, they're going to run you over regardless, but at least you won't feel it if you're high.
Right.
Not speaking from experience necessarily. I'm just people who I know who have dealt with those problems. And
Yeah.
and alcohol is the same to an extent, maybe not quite as severe, but it enables people to ignore their problems just like other drugs do. And I think a lot of our social structures are now deliberately designed to do that same thing, to help you ignore the natural consequences of foolish decisions.
Yeah.
A lot of our welfare programs that, again, began as probably with the best intentions on behalf of most people, have grown far beyond anything useful, and they've enabled pathologies instead. And it's just one thing after another that lets us ignore foolish consequences until eventually they can't be ignored anymore. And it all just blows up.
Well,
Yeah.
an overriding theme I'm seeing in Proverbs that we've been doing the last few weeks, it's probably all of Proverbs, it's admonitions to take you out of that base animal reaction. And okay, this is how humans react, as opposed to, your animalistic nature. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a good example, that verse in and of itself.
Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
All right. Verse 12. We're probably not going to be able to get to talk about all of them, but there's a lot of overlap between these proverbs, so I think that's okay. You see a man who is wise in his own eyes, there is more hope for a fool than for him. And that goes right back to the same thing about trolls. If somebody seems like they are teachable and willing to be wrong, then they may be worth engaging with. But people who believe that they already know everything, probably not worth your time, except as an object lesson for other people.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Pharisees. Yeshua was constantly telling them that, there's more hope for all these sinners over here than for you guys, because you guys think you got everything figured out already. So how can I teach you anything? I came for the doctor comes for the sick people, not the people who think that they're well. Because the Pharisees
Yeah,
weren't well. They were sick and they just refused to admit it.
Yeah, and this is exactly what he was essentially demonstrating.
Well, you can't put anything in a full glass.
That's a good point.
Perceived or not.
That's the proverb.
Yeah.
All right. So
Well,
this next one. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
No. I was just going to say it's just neat how many people know everything, It just kind of amazes people that have all of this knowledge. And I think it's partly responsible because of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jay is one of those people.
Yeah. I don't know all the answers, but I can Google.
Oh, well, I just think, if we stay humble, no matter how much we know, we can continue to grow.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I
right.
think it's so important.
Yeah,
But once you got people
absolutely.
that know everything in the room, it's just going to end badly.
It's also no more fun if you really think about it. It's like if everybody knows everything, like how much fun is there in life to not be
Right.
discovering new things, or like
Most certainly.
takes all the joy out of life.
Do you remember the song by Mac Davis, Lord, It's Hard to Be Humble?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That says it all. Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. I don't think I'm perfect.
All right. Let's go on to verse 13. The sluggard says, there is a lion in the road. There's a lion in the streets.
Oh, there is.
Well, what's going on here?
Any excuse doesn't matter. Any excuse.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And he might be actually afraid of something bad happening, but it doesn't say the coward. It says the sluggard. This is just somebody who doesn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jay, I was just agreeing with. I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've heard people say that there's a lion in the road is a totally unreasonable thing to say because lions live in the jungle. But
Right.
that's not really true. I mean, we've got lions in Texas, and there were lions in ancient Israel in the days of Solomon. Lions prowled in the hills around Jerusalem. So the sluggard here isn't saying something completely ridiculous. It's not like he's saying there are Martians outside. He is saying something that he thinks somebody might believe. If I don't want to go to work and I call my boss and say, hey, I'm sick. Oh, boss, I'm sick today. I'm sorry, I can't come in. It's not because I'm sick. It's just because that's an excuse that I think my boss might believe.
Yeah. And I think a person that doesn't want to do anything, they will always find an excuse. No matter what, they'll always find something that's going to, if they were to have an escort, there will be something wrong with the escort to go outside. They'll all
I don't trust
be
this
something
guy
there.
or something.
Yeah.
And verse 14 goes along with verse 13 because he's essentially saying that it doesn't matter what you do, the sluggard's still going to be laying in his bed. You can pave the way and put him in a wheelchair, and he's still going to find some reason not to go. All right. Verse 15. Several of these are about the sluggard here. Verse 15 is a slightly different take on it, though. Sluggard buries his hand in the dish. It wears him out to bring it back to his mouth.
That's just so funny.
Yeah, I mean, you can just picture that. Got a bowl of cereal or whatever sitting in front of you, and you put your hand down, and I'm too lazy to pick it back up again. There's another side to this proverb in the plain meaning. It's talking about eating food, but it's also talking about everything, starting anything and not finishing it. In putting this in the context of other proverbs here, you're talking about hiring people, sending people on errands, depending on people. If somebody has a habit of not finishing a job, then you don't want to hire that person, because they're going to do the same thing for you. People need to have a track record of, disciplining themselves, even when they don't want to do something. And I know Paula and I have both been really busy on projects for the last 6 months, just working constantly, preparing notes, writing articles, creating videos, all kinds of stuff. And sometimes it just gets so tedious and you just want to quit. And I've seen Paula, like, I am so ready to be done with this. I've got to do this thing. I don't want to do it. I'm going to do anything except that. And then she turns right around and goes and does it.
Totally true.
Kudos, Paula. Kudos.
Yes,
Oh my
indeed.
God. I'm just ready to get this project done. I'm probably 4 or 5 days away from launch, like that's so close. So it's just funny. But he's right. I'll be like, I'm not gonna do this, and then I go and I do it because it has to be done.
Mhm.
And being lazy about it or procrastinating or whatever, like, it's not helping. It's not helping anybody, right?
Nope. It's still there.
Yep. And if you're the only one doing it, that's the other thing and that's what's interesting. Like the thing about bringing the sluggard not bringing the food back to his mouth, like being that, lazy essentially. Like if you actually do that, you're gonna starve. Like you're just gonna starve. If you're so lazy that you can't be bothered to like bring the food to your mouth, you will starve. And I think that's a really important thing to understand, is that that's what happens with laziness. That is exactly what's going to happen if you let that take you over.
Well, Paul, you and Ken both have your own businesses, and you get to realize and enjoy this every day. I mean, you realize the fruit of your labor or lack of labor. So
yeah, it's true. You get to experience both.
yeah.
Nobody pays you to go on vacation.
Right.
All the things.
And
Right.
no one pays you to work, in essence, because
Yeah.
if you don't get the job done,
Yep.
you don't get paid.
Yep. Yep. That's right.
You got to have the results.
Yep. That's true.
Yep. Verse 16 is related. Sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. And, it goes back to there's a line in the road. A sluggard, like you were saying, Ken, a lazy person will come up with any excuse not to do what they have to do. And, a wise person will point out, well, if you don't do this, then, you're not going to have this benefit down the road. You're not going to gain this honor that you would have for, accomplishment. You're not going to have the self-respect, all these things. The fool is, this lazy person is always going to have an answer. And there's always another reason, because they have decided what they're going to do, whether they know it or not. They've decided what they're going to do, and they're going to let their evil inclination rationalize to come up with a justification for not doing what they need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes me think about like armchair quarterbacks, like just the whole idea of how our culture has become like that. Like everybody has an opinion, everybody thinks they know, but there are way less doers in our modern culture than there are spectators.
Mm-hmm.
And
Blamers.
this to me also speaks to that particular pattern, because you can talk all you want about what you think should happen in a situation, but if you've never been in that situation personally, You know, just like running a business, like being an entrepreneur versus like being a corporate, I don't want to say slave, but you know, corporate employee. You don't know what it's like to take a vacation and not get paid. You don't know what it's like to run a particular kind of business and what all the cost of that business is. But you have plenty of people willing to talk about, like, if that were me, I would do this. If that were me running this business, I would make all my prices really cheap.
Mhm.
And it's like much easier said than done when you don't understand what the costs are
Yeah. And if you
of
tell
doing
that
business.
person, well, why don't you do it then? They'll say,
Yeah.
well, the
Right.
system's against me. And,
Yeah.
you know, because
They'll have excuses.
yeah, my boss is, you know, he's a different religion and he's a bigot against me, or he's a racist or a sexist, or there's some reason, and it's always somebody else's fault. There's always some reason that they can't succeed other than that they just didn't have the discipline to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the critics are usually, people who are critics are usually the ones doing it. So you see that a lot too, is people who are critics
Mhm.
obviously think that they're wiser than the people who are actually doing all the things.
Critics often do nothing though.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
If there are any specific proverbs that anybody wants to talk about that we haven't gotten to yet in this chapter, bring them up now so we can address those before we do run out of time.
22.
Well, the next, I was going to say the next one, like one who takes a dog by the ears. Is this just because like it's a stupid thing to do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never tried to take a dog by the ears. I'm assuming it wouldn't go well, but
Yeah, well, they like to have their ears scratched and pulled, but this is talking about ancient Israel where people didn't really have pet dogs. If there's a dog running in the street, then it's, you know, either a work dog or it's a feral dog. And you don't want to go grabbing those kind of dogs by the ears because you're going to get bit.
yeah, that makes
And,
sense.
you know, I used to, there was a popular blog that I read years ago, and, you know, I just kind of outgrew it, I guess. But one of the things that the blogger talked about frequently was people who interfered in other people's business. And he would frequently post a video that he found online and say, here's an example of why you don't get involved in strangers' businesses. And it would be, you know, some guy and his girlfriend or wife having a public fight. You know, they're hitting each other, screaming at each other. And some guy would intervene, you know, being a white knight, and then he'd get the crap beat out of him, or he'd be shot or something. And it was because this couple, these people that he didn't know, this is just how they lived. They were always behaving that way. And, you know, it's certainly unhealthy. It's certainly bad for them, but it's also not really a good idea to intervene in the business of strangers. Now, if these are your friends, that may be something different. Or if somebody's life is obviously in danger, well, maybe there's a reason to intervene there, depending on whether you actually have a chance to help anybody. But just sticking your nose into somebody else's argument, it's usually a bad idea.
Yeah, yeah.
How many times,
especially when you're talking about tempers being high.
how many times have you seen the police go out on a domestic violence or domestic quarrel, and the victim turns on the police?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they realize that their significant other is probably going to go to jail or something, you know?
Yeah.
And cops talk about how dangerous that situation is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When they can go in and all of a sudden they turn on them
Mm-hmm.
just because.
Yep.
Well,
22
some of that
seems to
speaks to patterns. You know, people's patterns. They have patterns in their relationships. They have patterns in their life.
Yep.
And we're foolish if we think we're going to just like change that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what somebody's patterns are,
Yeah. How it could escalate, all that. Yeah.
yeah. All right. So verse 22.
It seems like it's unfinished.
The words
like
of
a
a whisperer
partial
are like
prophet.
delicious morsels. They go down into the innermost parts of the body.
Where's the rest of it? Okay.
It kind of seems like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's not really giving you a consequence.
No.
Or is
I would assume.
why?
What's
Well,
that?
I would assume that means that it it goes like deep into them and like it almost like it fills them up.
So is whispering bad? I assume whispering is speaking deceptively. I don't know.
Yeah, King James translates it as a talebearer, or a same word means, the word is nirgan, and it means a murmurer, whisperer, a backbiter, talebearer. So this is
Okay.
somebody who is saying negative
I got
things about
story.
somebody. Lashon hara.
Actually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that makes sense because like that stuff is gonna stay with people. Like the idea that it goes down into their inmost parts, it means it will not leave them.
Well, just like that curse we were talking about at the beginning of the
Yeah.
chapter, it gets into your head and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. Well, I guess 23 continues it though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's definitely comparing it.
yeah, it's talking about somebody who is it's another version of Lashon hara. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, Ken, but it's a Hebrew term that means the evil tongue. So,
Okay.
and that encompasses slander or gossip, curses, anything that you're just saying bad things about people. So in the first case, in verse 22, this is somebody who's talking to you about somebody else's business, talebearing about other people. In verse 23, it's somebody talking to you with deceit. You know, somebody with fervent lips. So like they're saying things that are that sound sincere. Maybe they're flattering, maybe they're telling you things that you want to hear in order to manipulate you, but they've got an evil intent. So the glaze covering an earthen vessel, that one really kind of puzzled me. It's like, what exactly does that mean? How is that like somebody with fervent lips and an evil heart? But one of the commentaries I read, yeah, it looks like more than it is. In one of the commentaries I read, the actual Hebrew words here are silver dross. So covered with silver dross. And that's literally what this glazing is. In Kiel, in the I don't know, German names, I can't pronounce them. Anyways, these guys, K and D, they were saying that one of the processes that used to be used for glazing earthenware pots was when they refined silver, they would save the dross. So it would essentially be a lead and tin mixture that, you know, you'd scrape off the silver and it would have all kinds of impurities and stuff in it. But they would use that as a thin glaze over an earthenware pot. And then they'd bake it in. So you'd get this nice silvery sheen on the outside of a pot, or on the inside, depending. But it would look kind of silvery and it would look fancy, but it's actually trash.
And it was full of lead, would like poison you.
Yeah, they probably didn't know that was poison. I don't know if Solomon knew that or not, but it's picturing something that looks good on the outside, but isn't really what it looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
So these verses are like the Jerry Springer verses. We're very intrigued by all of somebody else's garbage, but we watch it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so the rest of this chapter, any other proverbs that anybody wants to address or talk about?
So I'm curious about verse 25.
Mm-hmm.
It says, when he speaks graciously, do not believe him, because there are 7 abominations in his heart. So there must be a significance about 7 abominations, but I'm not getting the reference. Do you have any idea? Does anybody?
Well, 7 being perfect or complete. Other than that, I'm not sure.
I like what 6 says about it. Talks about his hatred being covered up with deception, and his wickedness will be exposed in the assembly.
Mm.
And I think people sometimes, when people are exposed, it's kind of like you get to see. I don't know if you remember watching Scooby-Doo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When they always caught the person, it was always a person in disguise.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to act as if they were not against someone, but they were. And I just think it was all guys that they were hide behind. And I think it's the same thing with people, and I think especially now, people may say, they like you. They may say this and they may say that, but at the same time, in their heart, they know that they have those abominations against.
Mm-hmm.
It made me think of when Yeshua is talking about somebody who is set free from an unclean spirit, but then they don't correct the problem that caused that demonic influence in the first place, and then the spirit comes back and brings a bunch of his friends with him. Kind of made me think of that, and I was trying to see whether it actually says 7. Yeah, it does. In this is Matthew, what chapter am I in? Matthew 12, verse 43 to 45. Let me bring this over on the screen.
Okay.
So this one right here.
Oh,
When
there's
an
your great.
When an impure spirit comes out of a person, it goes through arid places seeking rest and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to the house I left. When it arrives, it finds the house unoccupied, swept clean, and put in order. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the final condition of the person is worse than the first. And I'm not sure what to
Interestingly,
make of all of
Proverbs
that
was
right now.
written. Proverbs obviously was written before Matthew, so this may be the genesis of that.
Yeah, it could be a reference to it. I think that the idea of 7 is that total or perfect abominations.
Yeah,
That
that's
he's so bad, there's no hope for him.
Yeah, unlimited in a sense. And I think
Which verse was that again?
Verse 25.
25. Okay, thanks.
And you know what I think about this? When Jesus tells Peter how many times he should forgive his, I think, of brother, and he's at 7 times 70.
Mm-hmm.
Which is obviously unlimited.
Yeah, that's the intent. It's not like he was wanting us to count and keep track.
490.
Okay. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and a stone will come back on him who starts it rolling, which is a lot like verse 2 that talks about the curse undeserved. This is a curse that is deserved. If you do something that causes bad results, I mean, don't be surprised and don't blame somebody else.
It's almost like a Mordecai thing,
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's a good example. Yeah, and Balaam too. Balaam taught Balak how to curse Israel, and he ended up being killed by Israel as a result of that. I think in general, people who spend a lot of time, creating elaborate schemes, trying to trap other people, they kind of get caught up in the complexity of their own schemes and can't keep track of it. Kind of like a liar who keeps having to add lies on top of lies in order to cover the old ones. Eventually it gets too complicated to keep track of and stay on top of, and you get caught by it.
Yep, exactly.
Getting caught in your own web.
That's what they say. What a tangled web we weave when we try to lie.
Mhm.